As we come to the end of 2019 and as we look forward to 2020, I want to take a moment to speak directly to our teachers, our education workers, and our administrators, and all those involved in our schools, just to simply express my gratitude to you. I appreciate it as a time of heightened rhetoric, but I don't want you to lose sight of my deep sense of gratitude for your service. I really value what you do. I know you work hard, and I know you do it for all the right reasons to nurture the talent of our young people and the next generation. On behalf of my family and my team and the public service, I want to say thank you, express a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a positive and successful 2020 to you, your families, and your students.
Ever since Ford's government was elected in 2017, many cuts have been made, one of them being Ontario's education system. There are many cuts and changes being made here, and everyone is unhappy. Parents are mad about students missing school, teachers are mad at the changes, Stephen Lecce is mad at the union is mad at Stephen Lecce. Honestly, it's just a wild goose chase to see who can make who more angry. The students are just mostly confused, and they're right, this is a confusing situation. Public education hasn't been in the limelight for a while, and the students' primary form of information comes from social media platforms which, more often than not, are misleading. We decided to look into what the students think is happening. Some people were lost, to say the least. Others were slightly more informed. First, we asked them what they think is happening.
Yeah, so I think that we're going to increase classroom sizes. So I think right now we have like around 30 students in our class, and we're just going to go all the way up to 40 or something. So, and then there's going to be ban on cell phones. We already have that. And then as cuts, teacher cuts.
There are cuts.
Like what?
Doug Ford has planned education cuts to like university students. Like if we go to university, we have to pay back.
What's really happening is that changes are being made to the psych-led curriculum, larger classroom sizes, teacher cuts, 2 mandatory online courses, not 4 because they're nice, cuts to the Ontario Student Assistance Program, which made post-secondary education affordable for students, fewer elective selections, and a cell phone ban. We would like to focus on the increased class sizes, mandatory e-learning, and teacher cuts. The admirable hero of this story is Stephen Lecce and his trusty sidekick, Sam Osterhoff. Stephen Lecce received a private education and seems to be struggling with the concept of what a public school is. Sam Osterhoff is still in school, being only 22 years old. However, he's also never received a public education. He was homeschooled with his 7 siblings, the dwarfs to his Snow White. A lot of people have noted Sam Osterhoff seems to just need a friend. The boomer of this story, Mike Harris, though he's no longer in power, was premier from 1995 to 2002. And much like boomers with the environment, he left the education system in shambles. Even though you've probably never heard of him, you definitely know his work. He got rid of the 5th year of high school, which caused a double graduating class in 2003. He passed a bill to make EQAO and the OSSLT mandatory, and he made it compulsory to complete 40 hours of community service. Yeah, he's that guy. So he's in the past, but he affected the present. Also, he is an example of how poor decision-making affects the education system. Then we decided to ask the students how they think these changes will affect them.
I feel like in the long run, it will affect us, because we're gonna get less one-on-one time with our teacher because of all of the students in our class, which can ultimately not benefit us. It's not gonna be beneficial.
So do you think that'll impact your studies then?
Pardon?
Do you think that'll impact your studies then?
Yeah, because I need my teacher to kind of sit with me and I need my time with my teacher, so.
Yes. Probably because probably it might not be affecting currently, but just probably in the couple months will pass, and then the classroom size will get bigger, and then by then it'll be less focus on each student. It's already less right now because we already have around 20-something kids, but now with 30 plus, it'll be even harder for the teachers to focus on with one kid at a time.
Eventually.
How so?
Well, a lot of students who are heading into since this is happening since I'm choosing to which university to go to, it impacts me a lot because I might have to think a lot more into depth about which university I want to go to, depending on what the fees and everything.
Potentially. How so?
because like if the online classes go into action like they said they would, then like personally I don't think that I'd be able to focus on online classes as I would like in class.
Most of the students' main concern was not being able to learn to their maximum capacity. Students are worried about not having enough one-on-one time with their teacher. However, there are many cuts and changes the students are unaware of, so we decided to ask the teachers how they think the students will be impacted.
Online learning does not work for all students. When I first started out in my career, I taught online summer school, 12U English. I started with 55 students. I ended with 17. So the model of online learning is not going to work for all students, and I think that that's something that the public and the government should be aware of.
Yeah, I think mandatory e-learning is appalling. I think learning is a human experience, and for the majority of people, it happens through human contact. Right? Remember the very first word you learned, or the very first skill you learned it with a person. So I think e-learning can be great if distance education is required, or if a student is ill, or there's some kind of traveling involved. I think it's a wonderful option that's exciting because we live in 2020. But I think to suggest that every student must learn this way for even one credit is appalling. And as a taxpayer, I want my taxes to go towards providing my children who are high school students with an in-class support from an expert teacher.
Definitely, because a lot of students may be stuck in a class that they don't want to take, but they can't change their timetable, so they're not as interested. They're not, like, you know, it's not for them. They don't want to be there. They're not going to do as well. Also, having jam-packed classes, it definitely makes it harder to have any one-on-one time with the student who may really need it.
So I mean, if we're talking about specifically phys ed class, I mean, I think that's going to have a really big impact on phys ed teachers. And I say that because phys ed is often a class where students get put into when there's no other courses left for them. So if I'm thinking about safety in a gymnasium, having like 40 kids in there and one teacher while you're playing, you know, basketball or volleyball or badminton, I'm thinking safety would be a paramount consideration. I also think equipment, sometimes we don't even have enough equipment now for 30 kids, and imagine having an additional 10, and the space doesn't really allow for 40 kids to be active in, you know, in an hour's time of phys ed class.
Yes. Bigger class means less eyes on, more reliance on independent work and things like that, so that's where it'll hurt in the class. But asking students to do online learning will have a huge impact. Students who sign up for independent learning courses, maybe 20% complete, because you really do need to do it all by yourself with little help or little outside involvement. So there'll be a huge, the failure rate of online courses will be high.
What the proposal of this government, they want to propose something called a soft cap, and a soft cap is sort of like just an idea. Like, you know what, 30 would be a good idea, but if there was 38, then that's how it would work. And they want to do a full average. So the best example is this idea of a 25 student cap in a classroom. Now, of course, if it's a soft cap, you could actually have two classes. One class has 49 kids in it, and the class beside it has one student in it. And the government is fine because the average of those two classes is 25 students per class.
Many different aspects were talked about, and the concerns the teachers have aren't unfounded. E-learning is a relatively new platform compared to other learning modules, and the research surrounding it doesn't usually bode well for the success of students. A study found that students taking an online course would have earned a C. However, if they had taken the same course in person, they earned roughly a B grade on average. Despite this, grades aren't one of the biggest concerns regarding e-learning. Like students, many teachers worry about the students not having the opportunity to get the one-on-one time that they might need. A study done by the Ontario Student Trustee Association shows that 53% of students prefer the traditional classroom environment. A study was also conducted asking students about any personal barriers regarding e-learning that they may face. 83% of students said that they encounter challenges such as maintaining the same average as regular school, understanding the lesson, not being able to learn what they want to, or having trouble communicating with their teacher. Ontario will join Michigan, Florida, Alabama, Virginia, and Arkansas in making 2 e-learning courses mandatory. The states that do have e-learning don't have the best ratings. Ohio's electronic classroom of tomorrow is an interesting case study of e-learning. Despite the mess that the United States government is in, they still want to distance themselves from this taxpayer-funded failed experiment. If Ontario's e-learning is anything like ECOT, we are in for a ride. In addition to this, teachers are being let off the job or transferred to other schools. These cuts were detailed in a memo from the Education Ministry to the school board, and they predict that 3,475 jobs over 4 years will be cut, expected to save the province $815 million. Let's ignore how villainous that sounds and focus on something a little closer to home. Our music department was directly impacted by this change. We interviewed Mr. Hobbs, now the only full-time music teacher at Middlefield Collegiate Institute, to see how the changes have impacted the arts.
Okay, departmentally, it's already with not necessarily Stephen Lecce, but the provincial Conservatives. We had a teacher here last year, Miss Klein, that was one of 2 music teachers in the department, and as a result of the cuts, she was surplused, and she's now teaching in another subject area at Stephen Lewis, and we have other teachers through Middlefield's faculty here that have covered Miss Klein's sections, but we now have teachers that weren't originally teaching music, and the department itself has changed. Also with our sections, senior repertoire was canceled as a result of the cuts as well, and there was supposed to be, I think, about 60 to 70 students in that course. That's no longer running due to the cuts.
Teachers being fired or transferred severs the ties and relationships that students have formed with them.
But we knew that also the following, I think we lost a lot of teachers.
I was one of them.
Yeah,
Miss Pfister, if you guys remember Miss Pfister was one of them. Yeah.
It's just painful, right? Because you build relationships with people, and then that when you start to see this is what the impact is, right? People don't work here anymore, and
So is $815 million really worth the education of generations to come and the sentimental connections students build with their teachers, let alone the government's disregard for the teachers that will be out of work? If we really examine the situation at hand, having less teachers ultimately means courses are cut. Math and science will most likely be fine, but electives won't. We've already seen the effect of this. Along with that, the currently offered courses will have less availability. This leads to the maximum number of students being forced into one class. These numbers are expected to change as more students are being put into each class, resulting in larger class sizes. The student-to-teacher ratio was initially expected to increase from 22 to 28. After some debate, the ratio was decreased to 25. The education minister states that they are making more resilient children and preparing them for the future workplace by doing this. Here's what some teachers had to say about it.
In terms of building resiliency in our students, adding more students to a class is not a way to build resiliency. We already have a max of 28 to 30 students, depending on the level, in our own classes, and what that will mean is that we will have up to 40 or 45 students. They won't be able to receive the same one-on-one support, the feedback, turnaround in terms of assignments and evaluations and assessments, and it will be a complete disruption to our current education system. In terms of implementing mandatory online learning, that's not equitable. Across Ontario, we have students who don't have access to the resources, to the technology. Also, statistics are showing that, yes, some students do enroll in these courses on an optional basis, but the success rate is far lower than the success rate we have of students who are in a class. So to impose these changes is completely unfair and inequitable.
Well, it sounds to me like he's trying to find a pedagogical reason for what's ultimately a fiscal choice. So the cuts don't have to do with making a better education system. They have to do with reducing the education budget so that they can balance their books. And you know, whether that's right or wrong, it's not for me quite to say right now. I know what my own feelings are. I don't want to be biased. That's one approach, right? We need to spend less money. And so that's okay, that's their priority. It would be better if they were just honest about it instead of trying to say, oh, actually this is a way we're improving students' lives, because it seems to me that's a kind of soggy excuse for it. That's like my students coming in and doing, instead of a 20-minute presentation, a 10-minute presentation, and then trying to tell me it was because they wanted to somehow improve my perception of them or something. You know what I mean? You're just be honest at least about what you're doing. We need to save money. This may not help our students as much as we wish it would, but we really got to save some money. So I'd appreciate that kind of honesty rather than trying to act like they're doing it out of student interest.
Even with all that going on, the union isn't silent. Due to all the cuts, the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation President Harvey Biscoff said, quote, "The minister is doing his media relations nonsense again. This is not a productive way forward," end quote. He then announced a Work to Rule campaign for high school teachers, which escalated to a strike. We asked some teachers if they think the strike will be successful.
I think that there does need to be pressure on the government. I agree with the union that they're trying to send a message. I'm not sure if the 1 day a week with the rotating strike is the most effective way to do that. However, I do think that the reason they're doing that is because we have a lot of public support. We have a lot of parents supporting us in the community, and I think that the union doesn't want to lose that support. And we're trying our best not to affect the students in a real way, so hence the reason we haven't gone on full Work to Rule yet, because that would affect students' extracurriculars, all those types of things. And so I don't think this is sending as strong a message, but I get why the union's doing it, because I think that they're trying to maintain the community support. To be honest, I think the only thing that's going to wake up this government is a full withdrawal of services day in, day out, or a full Work to Rule.
So do you think we should do that? And potentially lose
the community support? It's a really hard question to answer. I think it would mean that there would be a faster resolution, which I think is better for the community and the students. So yes, I'm going to say yeah, I think we should do that.
I do support the way our union has decided to approach this, because I think with the once a week, it's forcing busy, disinterested taxpayers to pay attention. So the first time it was easy for parents to sort of ignore it, but I think now with doing it cycling, maybe people are saying, maybe I should figure out what it is that's going on. Maybe I do need to get informed. So I'm hoping that this sort of trickle down of ideas is finally coming to the average person. And even some teachers I don't think are informed about what it means to have an average class size of 22. 22 sounds incredibly low. I dream of having 22 students. But that's not what average class sizes mean. It means it's averaged across the board, so that that blind student who gets one-on-one care, well, those other 21 students had to go somewhere else. So I think it's allowing an opportunity for citizens, for voters, for taxpayers to understand the issues at hand.
So I think in terms of raising awareness to the public about why teachers are doing it, because I think there's a misconception, and I think Mr. Lecce has indicated this or pointed to this, has said that this is about money. And the reality is that it's not for teachers. We really are concerned about we have a great education system in Ontario, and we want to maintain the same level of that education system. So in order to do that effectively, class sizes and getting rid of supports for students, that will have a big bearing on individual students. So yeah, I think it's making the public more aware, so long as they're looking at it with an open mind and they're not listening verbatim to what the government is saying. Hopefully they are talking to teachers and they are listening to our district president in what the real concerns are here. Yeah.
Okay, that's very true. We do have the legal right to negotiate our collective agreement, and we are going to exercise that right, hopefully in a way that's going to be least disruptive to our students, to our families, to our community. However, we also need our students, the families in the community, to understand that we are here to fight for our students, to fight for education, not just today but in the future. And yes, the government can ultimately impose a contract on us, But this was something that happened in 2012, and while they did impose it with the Bill 115, there were ramifications, and we took them to court. And we don't want to see that happen again. We think this is a waste of time. We would rather them just come to the table and negotiate with us wholeheartedly, legitimately, and come to a final collective agreement.
The union is beginning to make parents mad. Parents have begun to worry that their child is missing too much school. Overall, the union is in a difficult position. The current situation is not good for anyone. The government is using the strikes as an example of the union jeopardizing education. However, a longer strike would ruin the education for a lot of high school students, similar to the way that Mike Harris did. Although the OSSTF is a major organization working against the changes, it's also important to remember there are other organizations that are in charge of different districts in Ontario. The York Communities for Public Education is a group of people fighting for education in the York region. It's a group of students, former and current teachers, and people involved in education who are trying to prevent the cuts in Ontario. After attending the most recent meeting, it became clear that even former teachers are concerned. Jim Ryan, a former teacher and political advisor of the YCPE, spoke to us about the possibility of history repeating itself.
This is not the first time I've been through this. I've seen this before when Mike Harris was Premier of Ontario. He stole $1 billion off the students of this province. He plunged the educational system in crisis for the entire 6 years he was Premier. And it took many years for the province to recover from the Harris regime. I think if we allow Mr. Ford to go through with the cuts that he wants to make, it will put students back another decade. And it'll take a long time for our educational system to recover.
The bill claims to modernize Ontarian schools, which sounds positive. We live in a modern world, and our public schools should match this as well as they can. However, it's difficult to see how these cuts are modernizing. Much like with essays, it's important to use good examples to produce better work. We should look to Finland, one of the world's best education systems that produces students that strive to learn and want to further their society. They build on structure where there is plenty of rest and less emphasis on homework and tests. In comparison, it's obvious that Ontario is moving backwards. Finland's education system works to create a community from a young age, whereas Ontario, the quote modernization that is being introduced only pushes students further into their own shell. E-learning and increased classroom sizes will limit face-to-face interactions with other students and teachers. The budget cuts will make it far more difficult for students to form connections outside of school. Everything that the bill claims to fix will ultimately increase student stress and make it more difficult for students to be successful. You simply can't change education and expect that no one is going to be affected. A child's first exposure to the world is through school. School builds nearly every foundation. Their early years greatly shape who they want to see themselves become and what role in society they want to play. We spend 7 hours in school every day, and that's without clubs and homework. Frankly, most of our childhood and adolescence is spent in school. High school is a huge part of our lives. This doesn't even include our future. This is when we start to plan out the courses that'll shape our future. Electives being cut limits options for post-secondary, and with larger class sizes and e-learning, students can't get the one-on-one time that they need to do well. As a result of this, their chances to reach their fullest potential decreases dramatically. Students aren't able to learn, which means they aren't fully prepared for the world. Just to be clear, we came in with pure intentions. We tried to find someone who supports this. However, we couldn't find anyone to vouch for this plan. As divided as this battle between the union and Lecce seems, it's obvious that one side is clearly wrong. Especially when it's examined by anyone with experience in the public school system. It's abundantly clear that we should not be asking if we are in trouble. We should be asking, how in trouble are we? Unfortunately, we don't know how bad this is going to be. If we take Mike Harris's regime as an example, the likelihood of this being okay is very low. So while all of this is terrifying, what can we do about it?
I just want to encourage you to please voice your concerns, stand up for what you believe in. There is this huge misconception that if you get involved in any social advocacy work, that you will be punished for it. And I just want to clear that up. You will not be punished for it. Please join us on all of our protests, on all of our events. I'm sure that this lovely filmmaker here will share our social media with you. But please go out and really take advantage of these opportunities and really stand up for what you believe in. Because even if people tell you that it's not going to be easy or that you shouldn't be doing it, that doesn't mean you should stop. We really do outnumber the people that tell us what to do. So when we come together, anything is possible.